Hey kids, here we are. It's Monday afternoon. I'm sitting in my backyard. It's beautiful. That crunching sound is a bone my dog is eating that he found on a walk. You know when you walk your dog sometimes in the wilderness and so they can run it up with the leg or a whole backbone of a deer or something crazy? My dogs do. So they brought back some piece of a deer leg. Alright, we're almost done with this. So I'm going to read this chapter, and then the next time I read, I will read the last two chapters together. So we will finish the book. We're almost at the end of our story, just like we're almost at the end of our third grade year. Pretty crazy, kiddos. Alright, let's see. I'll start where I ended last time. Not at all. Strong John was grinning as he came up behind him. I understand completely. Some things a man simply cannot do. I suggest you turn your back, Marley. Then modesty can be preserved, and we can all get warm without delay. The torches were damp, but at last they managed to light one. The map, tightly rolled and securely wrapped in Rowan's clothes during the swim, had survived, and John and Marley crouched beside Rowan as he unrolled it and spread it out on his knees. The red lines continued upward, twisting and turning, but the next verse was blank. But in the next blank space, the verse Rowan had come to expect had appeared. Left or right, which will you take? For both of them your heart will break. One is cruel, one is fair, one a passage, one a snare. Choose the one that hides delight, and you will know your path is right. They all looked up at the huge stone face, and the gleaming eyes still cast their reflection over the water. But now that they were directly below them, they could see that the two eyes were hollow, and they were entrances, but to what? Which one was the door that led to the mountaintop? Rowan bent his head to the map again, and the outline gave no clue. There were no markings to show twin passages, only clues that were in the verse. We will look at both and then decide, John said. But when they climbed the rocky face and peered into its eyes, they found that both caves looked alike. The walls of both were gleaming with a strange white-blue fungus that shone in the dark, and both were roughly the same size and shape, though. The left was slightly higher and slightly wider, and from both sounds came the sighing and breathy sound. What does it mean one is cruel and one is fair? Demanded Marley. They're both the same. It says that we should choose the one that hides the light, Rowan pointed out. Perhaps we should try each of them and see to see where the torch flickers and dies. Marley moved uncomfortably, shaking her damp hair from her eyes. Agreed, said Strong John. We will first try the right-hand side. Who knows? But that is the last line in the verse. It's speaking of the absolute truth. As it was in the swamp, it says, your path is right. Perhaps it means just that. They held up their torch to Alan and watched him raise his in answer and turn away and begin his lonely journey back to the cave entrance. Then they crawled up to the right-hand passage. It curved immediately and then curved again, and Rowan soon lost his sense of direction. He could walk upright, but Marley and John had to bend their heads slightly, for the roof was low. They crept along, stumbling on the rocky floor, and the flame of the torch burned as brightly as ever. Then, abruptly, they came to a halt. In front of them, the cave-like passage narrowed into a low tunnel, barely large enough to crawl through. That settles it, panted Marley. A snare if I ever saw one. Now let's try the left. It was too much to hope for straight advice from Sheba. The left-hand passage was easier to walk in. It was straight at first, and larger than the other, and the sandy floor was smooth. But again, the flame of the torch did not flicker. They walked on and on, turning corner after corner in increasing puzzlement. The map had never failed before. The sighing sound was louder now, and it filled their ears and whispered around them, and Rowan could smell something. A smell like damp and mold and cold and thick darkness. At first he thought it was his imagination, or the glowing fungus on the walls, and he rubbed his fingers over it and smelled them. No, the fungus smelled like nothing, as far as he could tell. Strong John, who was leading, slowed and finally stopped as the tunnel curved yet again. I love these carbonated water things. Watch, you're going to probably find out it's bad for you. Hopefully not. He stopped as the tunnel curved yet again. Go on, John, called Marley impatiently. The faster we go, the sooner we'll be out of here. The tunnel is starting to go down steeply now, and the walls are smooth with no handholds, and the sand will make it difficult for us to keep our feet. I do not like this place, Rowan murmured. It looks fair, as the rhyme said, but it feels like danger. One is cruel, one is fair, one a passage, one a snare. Fear fluttered in his chest. Nonsense, said Marley. We have no choice. The other way is blocked. Not quite blocked, said John, turning to face her. There's room to crawl. It'd be a cruel journey, perhaps. It is the way after all, though. The verse, remember, rhymes, fair and snare. And I agree with Rowan. This place smells of death. You're both absurd. Breathing in short, shallow gasps, Marley pushed past Rowan, and she grabbed the flaming torch from John and darted around him and took 2 steps and slipped. She scrabbled in the shifting sand, trying to rise where the torch tumbled away from her down the slope, bouncing and turning, and then it fell over the terrible drop that lay at the end of the tunnel. Fell and fell, while Marley screamed. It hit the bottom finally with a sickening crack. They pulled Marley up after them as they scrambled out of the tunnel, almost running, their hearts beating at the thought of the fate that they had barely escaped. 1 more minute and a half, and they too would have tumbled helplessly to their deaths over that underground cliff. Stumbling around the last bend, they fell on their knees at the tunnel entrance. Marley was shaking. I'm sorry, she said over and over. Rowan, too, was trembling. Strong John's weather-beaten face was drawn, but he roused himself with an effort. Looking on the bright side, as Alan would say, he said, trying to smile, at least we now know that the right-hand passage must indeed be the way. The tunnel is narrow, but if we leave our packs behind and only take what we can carry in our pockets, we can do it. We will have to crawl and pray that it's not too long. Rowan swallowed, thinking of the cramped, dark hole that he had seen in the right-hand cave. The idea of creeping into it without any idea of where he was going or where the ordeal within was frightful. Oh, those are my chickens. They thought it was frightful too. The idea of, the red line on the map had been long, very long, but he said nothing. The other way had been a snare indeed, and it nearly killed them. If they're going to reach the mountaintop, they're going to have to crawl. So be it. They lit another torch and they edged across the right-hand passage, and they entered it and followed its sharp bend as before, cutting themselves off immediately from the sight of the gleaming pool. Rowan drew a breath as he realized the truth. Choose the one that hides the light. This was what the verse had meant. Not the torchlight as they had thought, but the reflecting light on the pool cut off from their view by turning of the right-hand tunnel, but clearly visible in the straight, fair left. They had misunderstood the words again. Choose the one that hides the light, and you will know your path is right. The answer had been there, twice, clear for all to see, and still they had blundered. When they reached the place where the passage narrowed, John, Marley, and Rowan opened up their packs and began transferring their most important possessions into their pockets and winding rope around their waist. It was clear that no baggage would fit through that tiny hole. As it is, Strong John and Marley would almost totally fill the space, and crawling would be slow and uncomfortable, with no turning back. Before we begin, we will eat, said John, pointing at the food they had discarded. We do not know when we will have a chance. Rowan squatted on the ground and began nibbling at some cheese and some bread. His stomach was empty, but it was churning, too, from the fear and the bitter black water he had swallowed from the black pool. He thought he had never enjoyed a meal less. Marley crouched over her pack, breathing hard. She ignored the food that John offered her, and Rowan wondered whether she was ill. but she seemed not herself since they'd entered the caverns, except for the time when they briefly were swimming. And now she was obviously in distress. Sweat was breaking out on her forehead. She bit her lips as she pulled out her sleeping blanket and cast it aside with shaking fingers. "Marley," said Strong John's voice in a low tone. She stiffened, but she did not raise her head. "Marley," he said again, "is it the tunnel?" "It is the tunnel. Is it not? It is the smallness of the tunnel that worries you." "I am not afraid," Marley said, but still she did not look up. "Once we begin, Marley, there will be no turning back. And if you feel you cannot do this, you should say so. You have been uneasy ever since we entered the caverns. We have all seen that. You fear enclosed spaces." "I do not. I am not afraid," Marley said, but her voice was thick, and she drew back her head and looked John in the eye, and she was quivering with fear and tension. "I am ready," she said. "Let us begin." And she walked to the narrow opening and threw herself to the ground, and slowly she began to wiggle into the tunnel. They watched as her head and her shoulders disappeared into the gloom, and then her body, and then her legs and her feet. They felt the agony of her mind as if it were a living thing. But they could do nothing. But wait. Only when at last her strength broke and she began to scream and to gasp and to cry out to them and to beat on the rocky walls could they act, and only then could they pull her from the suffocating prison her fear had made and help her breathe again and still her cries. "I thought I could defeat it," she sobbed. "I was sure that this time, for such an important task, I could do it. But it overwhelms me, John, as it always has." And she buried her face in her hands. "It's all right, Marley. Marley, be still," soothed John. "I do not like any shut-in place," Marley whispered. "But I cannot lift my head. When I cannot lift my head and shoulders, and when I cannot move my arms freely, it is as if I cannot breathe. I cannot even wrap myself tightly in a blanket for the fear of it." And she lifted her head and gulped at the air. "I saw that last night," said John, smiling. "I thought perhaps you did not feel the cold." "I nearly froze," she said. "John, I'm so sorry." "And Rowan, what will we do now?" "We will do what must be done," said John simply. "I will continue. You have the compass. Rowan has the map. You two will join Alan and together make your way back to Rin. If you follow the way we came with every care and remember." Marley stared at him in horror. Looked at him in horror, stared at him in horror. "But you cannot go on alone. John, you cannot." "Marley, I must. You know I must." "No." Rowan heard his own voice loud in the echoing space of the cave. He could feel his face burning. "You cannot send me home. I have the map. You need the map. There are 2 blank spaces left. 2 verses of warning still to come. You need to know what they are, Strong John, and you must take me with you." "I cannot do that, Rowan," said John. "I will not go back," cried Rowan. "You cannot make me." And he ran over to the narrow passage entrance and he sat down in front of it. "I must hold the map for you. I must find the water for the bookshaw. I promise them." He set his chin. John stared at him in helpless silence. Marley half smiled. "It seems you've met your match, Strong John, with the son as well as the mother." And she regarded Rowan curiously. Who would have thought it? John hesitated and gave in. "Very well," he sighed. "So what will be, and Sheba is to have her way." And he put a big hand on Marley's shoulder. "Goodbye, Marley, and good luck on this journey home. Remember all we have learned. This time you will face the dangers. You'll be well prepared. You will survive. Tell Alan that we 4 will meet again in Rin." In 2 strides he was at Rowan's side. "Come then, before either of us changes his mind, you skinny rabbit. You first." "Take care," called Marley as they disappeared into the tunnel. "Take care, Strong John and Rowan of the bookshaw." Her voice echoed in the cave behind them and then faded into silence. Now, thought Rowan in the darkness, we are 2. Chapter 12. The is called Bravest Heart. Not to say, crawling into that little tunnel might have made me turn around too. I agree with Marley. I am not one that likes to have my arms pinned or have any restriction to my breathing. Lifting my head, extending my legs, it'd be a deal. So I might not have done it. I don't know. Maybe I would. I think the bottom line, kids, is that you do what you have to do. Anything else is like extra, but if you do what you have to do, that's what you have to do. All right, well, I wish we were reading this in class. We would have finished it by now. Maybe read another book. And we would have done our play. Yep. There's my dog, Poe. Hi boy. Oh, hello. Hello. Oh, and that's Adeline, right back here. All right, bye kiddos.